Good evening, and welcome to my How Healthy Are You weekly educational call. My name is Dr. Thomas Brewer. I'm a PhD chemist, and today I have two topics that were asked. One is from a few weeks ago, and that's to talk about vaccines, and the other is some questions I've been getting recently about apple cider vinegar. Just about everyone thinks it's this great miracle product to consume orally, and that's actually not true, so I'll go over that. But first, about vaccines. So right now, the whole concept of vaccines is in the front of most people's minds because there will be a vaccine coming for COVID-19. And that's why I've been getting questions about vaccines and if they're necessary and if they're safe and the alternatives. So most of our vaccines, in fact, almost all of them that are used on a large scale previously have been made in China. And the problem with that is the quality control standards aren't as high as here in the United States. And so there's this very minute impurity of various metals, and sometimes these are known as heavy metals, things like lead. And that is where this link between vaccines and childhood autism has started, and there is definitely a lot of truth to that. There's numerous cases of children that were very healthy, and right after they got their vaccine, within a week or two, they started showing signs of autism. And sometimes it goes away, but most of the time they're in trouble. They're autistic the rest of their lives. It's a real shame. But I'm going to back up a little bit and just talk a little bit about why we even have vaccines and why they were produced in the first place. The whole concept of a vaccine still goes back to what I've been talking about for over 10 years, your immune system. So the reason vaccines were created was to stimulate the immune system so it could identify some sort of pathogen, whether that pathogen is a virus or a parasitic bacteria, it doesn't matter. The body has to identify it and then destroy it in some manner. So the concept with vaccines is to introduce a either weakened or dead form of some pathogen or virus so that the body can identify it, build something called antibodies against it, and then when the person is exposed at a future date to the live version or the fully concentrated version of some bacteria or some virus, the body will identify it and destroy it. So I'm going to go through that again in a little more detail. So when some pathogen, whether it's a bacteria or a virus, enters the body, there's a type of white blood cell, a part of our immune system, white blood cells, called a B cell, B as in boy, a B cell lymphocyte. And the purpose of these B cells is they put a chemical marker or tag on something that doesn't belong in our bodies. And then another type of lymphocyte, immune system cell, in this case it's a T cell. Most of you have heard of T cell lymphocytes because those are the ones that kill cancer, but they also destroy viruses and bacteria. These are the guys that are the hitmen in our immune system. So once something has been tagged by a B cell, then the T as in Tom, the T cell lymphocyte is able to destroy whatever it is. So it's a two-step process. The logic was, if we introduce a weakened or low concentration version of something bad like a virus, a cold or a flu virus, and then today would be the COVID-19 virus. If we introduce something like that, then the B cell lymphocytes will tag it, and the body will then recognize the real thing if you ever encounter it, and then your T cell lymphocytes know it's an invader. They don't even have to waste any time, and it gets destroyed. And that's how vaccines work. Now, that sounds pretty good, other than the one problem is the impurities in vaccines, which I talked about. Well, let's say we solve that problem by producing the COVID-19 vaccine in the United States, and it's very high purity. Well, the next issue with that is many people's immune systems cannot withstand that little introduction of a virus, whether it's active or inactive, or whether the bacteria that's introduced is dead or just a very, very low concentration. A lot of people can't handle it. Now, these people probably wouldn't handle it anyway if they were really exposed to the virus or bacteria. And these are the people that do not survive. They end up dying from an immune shot. So it is these people that should not get any sort of immune shot. If the immune system is weak, the best thing they can do is strengthen the immune system. Once it's strengthened, well, they have a choice. They can either get some sort of a flu shot or some sort of vaccine that they can survive now that their immune system is strong enough to deal with a weak version of a virus, or just trust their own B cell lymphocytes to tag whatever enters their body so that the T cell lymphocytes can destroy it. So the second problem with vaccines is people have to have a fairly decent immune system to begin with. And those that don't will get sick and some pass away. But the third problem with vaccines is, even though it sounds logical, it's really illogical on a grand scale, because during the cold and flu season, there's 10 to 20 different types and strains of coronaviruses, which are typically your cold and flu viruses. They're a type of coronavirus. And the vaccine only targets 2, 3, at most 4 of them. So vaccination is a very inefficient way of dealing with colds and flu. It's just not effective, because you can get your flu shot, and the odds of you getting the flu are still very high, because you're only protected from maybe 1/5 of the various flu strains out there. So it is much more logical to increase the strength and activity of one's immune system so that they are protected from all the strains of flu and all the various viruses and bacteria and pathogens that are out there at all times, not just right after their flu shot. So now we go to the COVID-19. That is going to be a targeted vaccine. So that's just going to be protecting us from one particular strain of one particular virus strain. So in that sense, you have some advantages because it's targeted and that's the only one you need to fight. But then comes the problems in modern high-tech society is this desire and propensity to add technology to vaccines that really don't belong there. We can call it tech. And it's just too tempting for those in power to not add something that will have an effect other than just destroying the COVID-19 virus. And you notice I say this over and over, I use the word destroy. Virus is not alive technically until it combines with something alive. It combines with cells and parts of your body that are living, and then the whole entity becomes alive. But the reason I'm not big on the COVID-19 flu shot that's coming is I believe it will not just be a flu shot, that there will be more in there than just a version of the virus that's either inactive or very diluted. So that's the issue. You always still have the issue of impurities, but I think that one's going to be very diminished since this vaccine will be made in the United States. But it's this fear of added tech being in there, and that added tech is usually something electronic, and it's a way to tag people, and it's not a good thing. It's much more logical just to make your immune system so strong that when you do catch COVID-19, your B-cell lymphocytes are able to respond very quickly. They will tag the COVID-19 as something that doesn't belong in the body, and then your very active T-cell lymphocytes will destroy the COVID-19 virus. That way you're protected from everything, not just COVID-19, but every other flu and parasitic bacteria out there, including cancer, right? The T-cell lymphocytes will destroy cancer cells. So it would be more prudent to be protected from everything and not just COVID-19 or not just 4 strains of cold flu or flu that comes around every cold and flu season. There is an interest now, and I see this happening with COVID-19, is a lot of countries are just letting the virus go. And you'll see in today's news and yesterday's news that the amount of COVID-19 cases worldwide are off the chart. They're like twice as high as they were when we were locked down earlier in the year. Well, that begs an interesting question, because if the cases are higher and often twice as high as when we were locked down, well, why don't we just lock down again? Well, the answer is we're not going to do that, because that is an economy destroyer, and it would be an instant depression. And I'm surprised we didn't go into a depression in the first place. And And maybe that depression's coming later. That is debatable, and that is an economics debate, not a health debate. But I don't see the country locking down to lower the COVID-19 cases. So they're letting it rip. And the reason they're doing that, but they're not saying this, is this concept of herd immunity. Herd immunity is just like getting a vaccine. You get a vaccine, and the body recognizes this virus, and the body builds antibodies against the virus, and that is how we destroy the virus. It's similar to the B-cell lymphocytes tagging the virus. That's the concept of antibodies. So it's recognized. The virus is recognized if we reach herd immunity. Well, herd immunity means that those that caught COVID-19 and survived, which is 99.5% of the people. It's a very, very high number of people that survive, and that's why they're letting it rip, because the mortality rate of COVID-19 is far lower than we thought back in March. I mean, we thought the percentages were going to be 2, 3, 4, 5% of everyone catching it, which would decimate the world population. But the number is less than 1%, and it's a very low number for those that are not elderly, overweight, or have an underlying condition like heart disease or diabetes. So these people that catch COVID-19 and survived, they are now walking vaccines. They are essentially vaccinators. And the news tries to twist this, and they don't tell you that if you're around someone that survived COVID-19, that 99-point-something% people, that they will share their antibodies with you the same way you could have gotten sick from being around them when they were a carrier. See, now they're no longer a carrier, they're a survivor, which means they have the antibodies, and the antibodies pass from person to person just like the virus would have. So if you're around someone that has these antibodies that survived COVID-19, well, now you'll have the antibodies, and then you'll pass those antibodies to someone else. And after a while, enough of the population has antibodies, and you notice people don't get sick, and that's when the flu cases drop drastically. And for this to happen, it normally takes a few months, from September to March for the standard flu, and then all of a sudden nobody is catching the flu anymore. It's a really low occurrence, and this is attributed to people getting a flu shot. But everyone doesn't get a flu shot during the cold and flu season. What happens is we always reach herd immunity. Enough people catch it, they survive, they pass the antibodies to someone who passes the antibodies to someone who passes the antibodies to someone, and then the cases for a particular flu drop to very low numbers, very low, like almost 0%. And I had a question, I keep getting this question about herd immunity and what it is, and that's what it is. It's a very good thing, and it works with people that have strong immune systems. They survive whatever flu or cold virus they encounter. They develop these antibodies through their B-cell lymphocytes, and then the antibodies are shared. And this is going to be the next area of contention when the COVID-19 vaccine is produced and is disseminated to the public, the question is going to be, are they going to force you to take this vaccine if you show the antibodies in your bloodstream? And this is going to get very political, and it's a tough thing because it could get bad. I mean, you may not be able not only to get onto an airplane, you may not even be able to get into a grocery store or go see your medical doctor or your dentist or your eye doctor, etc., without having this vaccine, whether you have antibodies or not, whether you had COVID-19 previously and survived or not. And there'll be lots of stories about, well, if you have the antibodies, they don't last that long, so you still need to take the vaccine. No, not true. But it's a good story, and if it's told long enough and strong enough, it will become the truth, even though it isn't. And then people showing the antibodies in their blood, well, everyone's not going to get tested. And again, the storyline will be, well, those antibodies won't protect you as long as the vaccine, so you better have the vaccine. So expect a lot of infighting when we start talking about vaccines versus antibodies. And so now you're a little more educated on how antibodies are formed and how good they are. And overall, your best bet is to keep your immune system strong. And people have been very interested in their immune system the past 7 months. I've been talking a lot about this for over 10 years. And the simple things like getting enough sleep, vitamin C, and zinc are always going to be true. And for those that want to take it a notch further, you take your Steromax, which is sterolins, plant-based sterolins. They're high in glucosides, which feed the white blood cells. They feed the B cell and T cell lymphocytes so that they're big and active, and then you're protected from everything. But it's always a good idea not just to take Steromax, but to do anything else you can to keep your immune system strong. Even lowering your stress levels and breathing correctly will strengthen your immune system. Next week, I'm going to be talking about the proper way of breathing, and it's not mouth breathing. And the reason it is so beneficial to breathe correctly, and not even going into my videos on breathing, just a simple concept of breathing that's very, very valuable. And next week I'm also going to talk about apple cider vinegar. And I'm not going to have time to talk about it today because I'm out of time. So I'll be talking about breathing and the correct way to breathe, not breathing techniques, just the correct way to breathe, and apple cider vinegar. It's not as good to consume as you think it is. So until then, I want to thank everyone for listening, and I'll be doing another call next week. Good night, everybody.